Welcome back to Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the #1 league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Travis Reier back alongside my great friend, longtime college football analyst Brent Beaird, most recently of First Coast News in Jacksonville, Florida. Of course, Brent also a voter for the most prestigious individual honor in collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. And Brent, we have 16 real SEC affiliated football games to get into today. First, though, greetings to Chino, the show cat. Chino making another appearance here on the show.
Our mascot decided that when he heard your voice, it was time to make an appearance. So I tell you what, Trev, he's a camera hog, is he not?
So, love Chino. I love Chino. My allergies, maybe not as much, but Chino's welcome here on the program anytime. But Brent, without further ado, so much to get into in this week one of action around the Southeastern Conference. It is literally the entire holiday weekend long. We go from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, basically taking you right into Labor Day on Monday. But we'll start with those Thursday night games. Not exactly marquee matchups. We'll start with Arkansas Pine Bluff taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks. That game is going to be contested in Little Rock. Pine Bluff a year ago from the SWAC, an FCS team, 2-9 in 2023. I guess when you look at storylines real quick for this one, Bobby Petrino back in as the offensive coordinator. Boise State transfer Taylon Green in as the quarterback. KJ Jefferson moves on to UCF. So one or two things that you're looking for out of this matchup in Little Rock on Thursday night.
Well, I think certainly you want to see how Taylon Green looks, the Boise State transfer, whom I understand has had a good camp. Green is 6'6", 215. He can also run. They have got one of the better edge players anywhere, don't they, Trav? And Landon Jackson. Just try to block him a little bit. But the reality here, a lot of people will ignore this game, and I understand that. But, Trav, if you're Bobby Petrino, a W is a W, is it not?
Oh, it absolutely is. And Arkansas, by the way, is a 48.5-point favorite. So expecting a lot of points from this Bobby Petrino-directed offense. You know, Pine Bluff wide receiver Javani Gibson here in the last few days referred to Arkansas's secondary as big but slow. So that added a little juice to an otherwise sort of opener for Arkansas that didn't really have a lot of that. Now, in fairness to Arkansas, the Razorbacks were last in the SEC in pass defense in 2022, but advanced, moved up to fourth a year ago. So we have seen improvement on that side of the ball under Travis Williams the last couple of years. Also on Thursday night, Murray State, another FCS opponent for an SEC team to open play for the 2024 season. Missouri, the host of Murray State on Thursday night. This is an SEC network game, 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Murray State of the Ohio Valley Conference, just 2-9 a year ago. Jody Wright in his head coaching debut for Murray State. This is a former assistant in the SEC, Nick Saban, among others. Newness also for Missouri, though, Brent, as it relates to the defensive side of the ball with a new coordinator. A lot of familiar faces on offense returning, although Cody Schrader, Javon Foster, a couple of key pieces from a year ago on offense for Eli Drinkwitz moving on. It's an opening stretch that really looks like cake for Mizzou, beginning with this matchup with Murray State. Almost has the feel of, and we've talked about that recently here on Second Helping. Check back in on Mizzou maybe around October.
Well, and look, if folks, this is one of those opportunities to see Luther Burden catch what, Trav? Double-digit passes in a game like this. Brady Cook certainly at quarterback. Also, now look, I know it's a secondary storyline, but Eli Drinkwitz has gone out of his way to challenge his fan base to show up for this game and fill the seats. And I'm just wondering, Trav, if what he said fell on deaf ears, or they'll have a little excitement on Thursday night.
Yeah, it's 11-win team from a year ago.
Absolutely.
You would think they would show up even for an opponent like this, but it is Thursday night. A little bit different from that perspective. We'll see exactly what the response is in Como to this opener. Let's move on to Friday night. The Oklahoma Sooners, first game as a member of the Southeastern Conference, 7 Eastern on ESPN. Oklahoma, a big favorite in this one. You know, there was a time not all that long ago, Brent, when Temple went through coaches like Al Golden, Steve Adazio, Matt Rule, Jeff Collins.
Yeah.
But it really hasn't happened for this program since 2020. After that run of 3 or 4 coaches, Temple has sort of returned to previous depths. For Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold, that era begins behind center. It's a defense for the Sooners. It feels like it's more and more taking on the identity of its head coach and Brent Venables. And I know we've talked about concerns on this offensive line, but when you have Bill Bedenbaugh as your offensive line coach, there is a little bit of a sense of security that that guy is going to put a legitimate first 5 on the field.
Yeah, and the reason that for our viewers that Travis brings up the offensive line, they are having to replace every single starter on the offensive line. When in this league, that's something you don't have to deal with. So that is really something to watch out for. Good call on Jackson Arnold. How is he going to do? He struggled, Trav, in some of the scrimmages. So I think that's going to be fascinating. Some people are going to be forgetting that Oklahoma is in the league, that we've got basically, when you think about it, SEC games from Thursday through Sunday night, which is very interesting. A lot of wide receiver talent for this Oklahoma team, and Nick Anderson, for instance, Deion Burks, another guy to look forward to. So it would be a very interesting game. And look, after last year, you know, this team really wants to get off to a good start, and that would be able to do it. So I'm watching the quarterback and the offensive line very closely in this one.
Yeah, the first 4 games of the season for the Sooners in Norman, you get Temple, Houston, Tulane. I like the ramp up.
Yes,
for the Sooners, because the degree of difficulty will go up after Friday night. Houston, Tulane, kind of going through the Willie Fitz trade, those 2 programs where the head coaching situation is concerned for Tulane and Houston. But then Tennessee, as we know, that SEC opener in late September looms down the road. Let's get into some Saturday games. We'll get there early with a noonish Eastern time kickoff. The Vanderbilt Commodores going to host the Hokies of Virginia Tech. This is one that's sort of flown under the radar a little bit. Again, early kickoff, ESPN, no formal announcement that I'm aware of for Vanderbilt where the starting quarterback position is concerned. Although I will say this, Diego Pavia, our guy, my guy.
Yes.
The New Mexico State transfer, recently named one of the team captains for Vanderbilt. That might be a little bit of an indication of what's to come. I know Brent Pry, the head coach for Virginia Tech, previously at Penn State. He has compared Diego to Trace McSorley, the former Penn State quarterback. What do you think? Vandy getting 13.5 at home in Nashville on Saturday, Brent.
But one of the things that you see is how good Virginia Tech is supposed to be, and a big rebound for them, and being able to challenge in that ACC. And certainly after we saw Florida State on Saturday, that gives some concern there. But look, for Vanderbilt, this is a big game, and this will be a real opportunity for them. Some of their best players on the defensive side of the ball, where they need to show some improvement. C.J. Taylor, Ricky Wright, for instance, with that. But I'm with you. I'm more than interested to see how Diego does. Hopefully they will trot him out. I tell you what better situation for Pavia to really step out and look like an SEC quarterback, as against a team that's predicted by some to even win the ACC.
Yeah, and after what we saw from Georgia Tech and Florida State last weekend, who knows in the
Really?
ACC at this point? Also, in that early window on Saturday, going to take a little bit of getting used to, I think, Brent, with some of these staggered kickoff times because
Really?
12:45 Eastern for Chattanooga making the short trip over to Knoxville to pick up a paycheck. Tennessee, the Vols, a 38.5-point home favorite in the opener at Neyland Stadium. No, Chattanooga, to its credit, an FCS playoff team from a year ago. I
Mhm.
think if you're a Tennessee fan, though, you're having a hard time not looking a week ahead to Charlotte and that
Yeah.
matchup with NC State.
Yeah, it really would. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how many tackles for loss James Pierce has in a game like this. They also really like Zalance Hurd, who comes over from LSU to help bolster that offensive line. Also, frankly, and I want to see, is Brew McCoy healthy, Trav, after that surgery? USC transfer. They really need him doing well. Squirrel White. And needless to say, all eyes will be on Nika Lama, and we'll get that pronunciation right by the end of the season. But I know it's Chattanooga, but there's still some questions to be answered here, right?
There are running back, one of those as well.
Absolutely.
Lost your top two guys from a year ago, although I think Dylan Sampson, if he's healthy, can be more than an adequate sort of successor in that rotation for Josh Heupel's offense. But certainly NC State next week, and then the trip to Norman down the
Ooh,
road coming up also
absolutely.
for the Vols. Let's keep it in that mid-afternoon time slot. And there it is, the Texas Longhorns first game for Steve Sarkisian's team as a member of the Southeastern Conference. Colorado State comes over from Fort Collins. You know, I look at Colorado State, and again, this is 3:30 Eastern on ESPN. I think Jay Norvell is a good coach
Yeah, I agree
for
with you.
CSU, and I like the quarterback for Colorado State, Braden Fowler Nicolosi. You may remember him from that classic game against Colorado a year ago. That was an
Mhm.
absolute shootout in Boulder. This is a redshirt sophomore, by the way. He's from Aledo, Texas. So it's a bit of a homecoming for him. Also for Texas, now there was buzz about the Longhorns a year ago at this time, perhaps being a college football playoff contender, and it
Mhm.
played out that way. A year later, that's the expectation. So we'll see how Texas deals with that to go along with entering a conference like the Southeastern Conference. And then the interior of that defense, because
Yes.
Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, both those guys are now in the National Football League, just absolute forces there on the interior. Sarkisian and his staff hit the portal pretty hard for defensive tackle type. So I would expect the talent level, while maybe not exactly what it was a year ago, to be at least comparable.
Oh, absolutely. And look, what's going to be interesting for them too is the passing game, and what we're hearing, Isaiah Bond is either number one or he's close to it. The wide receiver transfer from Alabama, Quinn Ewers had a good camp. Going to be very interesting to see how much time Arch Manning gets in a game like this. Calvin Banks, they really love on the offensive line. Justice Finkley as an edge rusher is going to help them too. Trav, are you interested, like I am, in the depth of this running back situation with the injuries that they have had, particularly to C.J. Baxter? I think that's something that that's going to have to be watched pretty carefully. I can't imagine, like in Gainesville, how hot it's going to be at 3:30
Oh,
Eastern time in Austin.
Jaden Blue going to have to step it up there at the running back position, among
Yes.
others. And he's seen big moments and big opportunities, even going back to the Sugar Bowl loss to Washington to cap the 2023 season. We saw a good bit of him to go along with CJ Baxter. So he has some experience that should help, but you're right. You're down two and you haven't played a game yet.
Yeah.
And you're an offense that is running back friendly, if not running back centric. So obviously a concern for Sark and his team entering the 2024 campaign. Let's talk South Carolina as the Gamecocks set to host Old Dominion on Saturday there at Williams-Brice Stadium. We talked about the quarterback situation a lot in the offseason and in the preseason, Brent. Old Dominion goes to Cola as a team a year ago that actually made a bowl game, 6-7.
Yeah.
And when I think about South Carolina, we talk about the importance for a good start, a win with Lenora Sellers taking over at quarterback for Spencer Rattler, because the next 2 weeks you go to Kentucky and then you get LSU in Columbia the week after that.
Well, there's so many questions here that is going to make this really a fascinating game. I mean, Travis, the number one thing I want to know is how healthy is Rocket Sanders?
Yeah.
Will we see a 100
We wanted to
yards?
know that for a couple of years now, it seems.
Really?
Like, Rocket. And when he was at Arkansas, we wondered that a lot, it seems.
Yeah,
like.
absolutely. Will we see the 100-yard Rocket Sanders, or will it be limited? Nick Harbor is a guy, 6'5", 235. He's a track star. That they need about 5 Nick Harbors, don't they, over the years? They've just not recently had the guys who can stretch the field. I like that D-line combination of Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders. That's someone to look at and appreciate. But look, these are games that South Carolina has really got to be careful about. And you don't want to have to get the ball with about 6 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter to either tie this up or win it. So
no.
That they need a good, competent performance on Saturday.
Yeah, very interested to see what shape the offense takes with Sellers behind center, because it had been very pro-oriented, understandably so. Spencer Rattler has looked really good in the preseason with the New Orleans Saints, by the way. So how that goes could go a long way in helping the South Carolina defense. If they are more zone read, run game, quarterback involved in the run game, that could have sort of complementary benefit to some other areas of this football team that still need help as well. Also on Saturday, the debut of Jeff Lebby as the new head coach at Mississippi State. Blake Shapen comes in, Brent, from Baylor to serve as Lebby's first quarterback of the Bullies. You've got some transfer portal additions at the wide receiver position, but as much as anything, a lot of unknowns for Mississippi State, a 24.5-point favorite over an FCS opponents in the Colonels of EKU.
I think the big concern here is, do they have, and I think it's safe to say they don't yet, and I think Lebby will be able to get a couple of recruiting classes to fix the lack of SEC caliber talent in some of these rooms that they've got. I'm just wondering now, when he was in Oklahoma, they ran a play about every 23 seconds. Not saying that they're ready to do that at Mississippi State, but I'm going to be interested to see how quickly that they can get adjusted to his offense. Good call on your part. The wide receivers, Kevin Coleman, is a guy that they really like. So that there are as many question marks about this football team, starting with the head coach on down, is probably any of them we'll talk about today.
Yeah, running back, a little bit of a mystery too, because Woody Marks moved on to Southern California. We'll talk about him coming up in just a little bit. But yeah, it's another sense of urgency game, even against an FCS opponent, because you go to Arizona State next week. Mississippi State does. So you really want to get some things accomplished against an FCS opponent in the opener in Starkville. We'll keep it moving in the state of Mississippi, and we'll talk about the Purple Paladins of Furman making a trip as an FCS opponent to take on Lane Kiffin's Rebels of Ole Miss. Ole Miss, a 42.5-point favorite, Brent. Furman, another FCS playoff team from a year ago, 10-3, coming over from Greenville, South Carolina. I think a lot of people, where Ole Miss is concerned, are interested in Walter Nolan, Trey Amos,
Yep.
these transfer portal additions on the defensive side, but Juice Wells on the offensive side. It's not just limited to one side or one area of this football team, the impact of some newcomers.
Well, and the great thing for Lane is they are able to, frankly, to take their time because of their schedule and to get these guys comfortable is your reality for that. Ulysses Bentley, the fourth, also is time for him to step up and really show what he is capable of doing. You made the point with Lane a while back, and this is something that needs to be brought up about every 2 or 3 games with him, is we know about Dart and we know about all these receivers, and they're really good, but I don't think Lane gets the credit, does he, Trav, for his he's almost stubborn with this, and it's a good thing for him. He loves to set the pace running the ball, and everybody thinks that they're 5 wide on every play and just throw it down the field. But their running game really opens up a lot of what they do in that passing game, does it not?
It does, and it wears down opposing defenses because they do it with tempo, and it sets up a lot of the explosive plays. A lot of the plays where you see Lane with the hands already in the air, they basically stem from a lot of what Ole Miss gets done first and foremost, either through the run or the threat or off of the run game. And having a quarterback like Jackson Dart that presents some of that dual threat ability makes them all the more difficult to defend. I think Ole Miss, I'm going to rename Ole Miss Old Mizzou, because Ole Miss and Mizzou are like the same teams to me going into it. Probably more so because of their schedules. They're similar that way, but Ole Mizzou is another team you might need to wait a few weeks to check in on. Although that trip to Wake Forest in a couple Saturdays, I'm interested in that one. I think Ole Miss will win that game. I'm just interested to see how that game sort of plays out on the road there for the Ole Miss Rebels. Let's also talk about on Saturday, the Alabama A&M Bulldogs making the trip down from Huntsville to pick up a paycheck on the Plains against the Auburn Tigers. Auburn, a 46.5-point favorite. Boy, some big numbers in some of these openers. Alabama A&M 5-6 a year ago. Lost by 34 to Vandy, if you want some reference for Alabama A&M. But I think for Auburn, we're all anticipating this infusion of playmaking talent at the wide receiver position to add to what you have in the backfield with Jarquez Hunter and those running backs, and just a far more explosive offense potentially for Auburn in year 2 under Hugh Freeze than what we saw in 2023.
Well, and I think we all want to see more out of Peyton Thorne. Now, will those freshman wide receivers be able to kind of lift him and onto another plane? I mean, still, Thorne's got 38 starts and 2,500 snaps, so that should certainly pay off. But I think Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson are going to help him tremendously, frankly. Now, one thing I want to see from them too, and I've heard a lot about how their defense is coming together, Jalen McLeod and Keldrick Falk, as far as edge rushers, that's something I'm going to be watching, because I think that's going to be huge for them also. And we talk about running games with Ole Miss. Auburn's got one of the better running games led by Jarquez Hunter, I think, in the entire SEC. So, and look, I think the thing here is if Auburn puts a 60-3 up, it will excite the fans. But is that really who they are as they get into the meat of that schedule?
Yeah, Cal next week's going to tell us a whole lot more.
It will,
obviously. And Auburn had its offensive struggles out in Berkeley a year ago, and then you go to Auburn, or Auburn comes to the Plains at the end of the month in September. Then you go to Athens the first Saturday in October. Right. That's when things really get real. But at least going into that final Saturday of September, you expect certainly this Auburn team to be unblemished. Also on Saturday night, 7:45 Eastern, SEC Network, Southern Miss travels to Lexington to take on Mark Stoops' Wildcats of Kentucky. You know, there was a time, Brent, not all that long ago, a lot of SEC teams, including Alabama, did not enjoy opening against Southern Mississippi. Southern Mississippi 10, 15 years ago had the feel of an SEC team, especially early in the season when the Golden Eagles roster was still pretty much intact. Had some frontline guys, recruited Alabama successfully, recruited the state of Mississippi successfully, mixed in those Mississippi JUCOs, and year in and year out had a good roster. Unfortunately for USM, hard times of late, 3-9 a year ago. It's kind of a transfer quarterback game in this one, isn't it? Brock Vandergriff for Kentucky, Tate Rodemaker for USM coming in from Florida State.
And listen, I remember Alabama playing Southern Miss every year.
Yeah.
And remember when Gene Stallings first landed in Tuscaloosa, one of the first games was a Southern Miss Brett Favre quarterback team. Trev, do you remember Favre? I think I lost about 15 pounds, was in an automobile accident.
Yeah.
And they really wondered if he was even going to play and lead Southern Miss to one of the wilder upsets during that time. But no doubt, Brock Vandergriff, everybody wants to see how he is going to do. I think this is kind of a very interesting Kentucky team. How much is Jamin Dumas-Johnson going to help them, the linebacker that comes over from Georgia, Marquise Cox on the offensive line? He's got 47 starts, so that's going to help Brock Vandergriff as much as anything. I'll tell you what, if they can run the ball and that line is better, Trav, that's going to be more. That's going to be the biggest help Brock Vandergriff may be able to have.
No, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And Vandergriff can help you in the run game. You know, he's an athletic guy. He can do some things with his legs in terms of the design run game. Maybe going to be a little bit different type of quarterback. You know, Will Levis a few years back could do some of those things athletically, but Vandergriff, it's going to be interesting to see how it translates for him in that offense. Kentucky with a couple of big old school, I'm going to call them old school, even though this is the first year without divisions, old school SEC Eastern Division matchups coming up. South Carolina and Georgia, both of those in Lexington the next 2 weeks. So focus in this opener for Mark Stoops' team, going to be something to watch as well. Hey, as we get into the marquee games for this weekend, Brent, what we'll do is I'm going to throw out one big thing. And if you want to give me one of yours as well, that's what we'll do. And we'll start with that high noon showdown at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, Daddy. Clemson and Georgia one more time. Dabo and Kirby. Gotta love it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Georgia,
absolutely.
a 13.5-point favorite, playing essentially in its backyard. My one big thing for the Clemson Tigers, and it kind of plays over into the Georgia defense with this, can Clemson produce some semblance of a run game to help keep all the pressure off Cade Klubnik, the quarterback for Clemson? You know, Georgia in the last 5 seasons, 4 of those seasons has had the #1 rush defense in the Southeastern Conference. Now, last year, Georgia gave up more than 80 rushing yards per game for the first time since 2018. And it wasn't a ton of yards that Alabama managed to pile up on the ground in that SEC championship game. It's like 114, but it was enough to control that Georgia defense, just enough, and help the Crimson Tide to that upset of the Bulldogs in the SEC title game. So that's my one big thing in this game. Can Phil Maffa, you know, Will Shipley now is in the National Football League with the Philadelphia Eagles. Phil Maffa, the rest of that run game for Clemson, can it give enough to help keep this thing off of Cade Klubnik entirely?
Well, I'm going the opposite direction, and I'm going to say, Trav, can the Clemson defense keep them in this game? I think that line with Peter Woods and TJ Parker, that we can already see this line's going to the NFL probably sooner than later
Talented
for
bunch.
Clemson. So my thing is, will that line be able to put enough pressure at this point on Carson Beck and slow down the Georgia running game in order to dovetail what you're saying for Klubnik and that Clemson offense to be able to stay in the game and keep up?
And Trevor Etienne for Georgia.
Absolutely.
Looks like a one-game suspension for the offseason DUI. They're banged up a little bit. Georgia is in that running back rotation as well. So how does that play out for Mike Bobo and the Georgia offense where the running back position is concerned? You always have confidence in Stacey Searles in that offensive line. You can almost rubber stamp it, it feels like now with Georgia, as far as year in and year out, putting one of the top 2 or 3 offensive lines in all of college football out there. But yeah, there are some questions to answer there. Now, look, if it comes down to it, the luxury Georgia has is that I think with Carson Beck and still with the weapons he has, even with Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey and some of those guys moving on, there is enough in the tank. There's enough that's been added that if Georgia needs to resort to maybe more of a throw it a lot game, it can do that. But you said it too. Clemson feels really good about its front and how it matches up there. So going to be fascinating to watch early on Saturday from Atlanta, Georgia. Brent, let's talk about another big one. This one in Gainesville, Florida. The Florida Gators, home dogs, getting 2.5 points against the Miami Hurricanes there at the Swamp. And so my one big thing in this game is which one of these quarterbacks will come up big in the fourth quarter. Cam Ward, Graham Mertz, because I don't know about you. I'm expecting kind of like this line expects this thing to be tight throughout. And then also you got to take into account some of the history with these head coaches too.
Yes.
Mario Cristobal, Billy Napier. Which one of these might make a mystifying in-game decision at some point? If you're a Florida fan, I think you can take a little bit of solace that even if you're down in the fourth quarter, we've seen with Mario at either Oregon or Miami last year. Ask Georgia Tech for more about that. It can get a little dicey with Mario late in games.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And to try, my one big thing here is at the end of the game, I think if you look at how many yards Damian Martinez gets, the new addition to that running back room at Miami, I think that's going to tell us a lot. Martinez, certainly last year, the transfer from the Pac-2, shall we say, getting over 1,000 yards. And look, I get the competition is different than the SEC, but there's two things here. Is it's going to be Cam Ward throwing the ball, and can they keep him contained? And how much help is Martinez going to be able to give him? And I'm sure his pops would probably say too, Trev, how much improved is that Gator defense going to be? If they can stop the run or at least slow it down, that's going to be huge for the Gators.
Yeah, there's been a lot of consternation with Gator Nation about the play calling duties with Billy Napier handling that. But you're right. A couple of things. If the defense isn't better and special teams, it may not matter as much. So, and also, you know, you wonder too for Florida, the availability of Montrell Johnson.
Absolutely.
At the running back position and how that could factor into this thing pretty largely as well. Brent, we'll keep it moving. Up next, Western Kentucky at Alabama. Now, look, on the surface, certainly not a marquee game. Alabama, a 31.5-point favorite. But how do you not have it on the marquee when you're talking about game one of the Kalen DeBoer era as he follows the all-timer in Nick Saban on the sidelines for the Crimson Tide? This is a 7 Eastern kickoff on ESPN. My one big thing for Alabama doesn't really change much from what I've talked about or we've talked about a lot through the offseason into preseason workouts. The secondary for Alabama, just kind of getting a feel first, who these guys are in large part. And then, this is a Western Kentucky offense that traditionally, if you go back to Jeff Brom, Petrino, now with Tyson Helton, one thing that this game can do for Alabama is provide a real snapshot of where the Crimson Tide is on the back end, because Helton in this offense, TJ Finley going to get the start at quarterback for Western Kentucky. This is a guy who's been at LSU, Auburn, Texas State. I think there is a test that can be had for Alabama back there.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. My big thing would go in the opposite direction. How improved is Jalen Milroe? We certainly know that Jalen can throw the ball accurately down the field. But, Trev, my thing with Milroe is on 3rd and 6, can you throw it 7 yards accurately? And that, we hear that is the case. We also hear a lot of improvement, a lot of lost weight, too, for this offensive line. So I would put those two together. Can they protect Milroe? Is he going to be more accurate? And because he certainly also has a running back room that's going to take a lot of pressure off of him. And frankly, I think Justice Hayes and Jam Miller within this first month or so are going to show that this may be one of the better running back rooms in the entire league.
I'm not going to be surprised at all after all the talk about DeBoer and Nick Sheridan and that offense and the explosiveness of it and the big numbers from Michael Penix a year ago out at Washington, if Alabama doesn't really feature the running backs early on.
Yes.
Because even in the spring game back on A-Day, we saw that. Alabama came out in a 2-back set with its first team offense. So I'm not going to let myself be surprised if that's the case in the opener, that maybe we see Haynes and Miller on the field together, even on the opening snap. But it's a good point about Milroe. There's layers to this offense where you have to be able to make the throws, not just the vertical throws where Jalen was particularly effective a year ago. The next step for him is intermediate accuracy, anticipation intermediately, and also in the shorter game, because there's going to be quick game to the outside with these Alabama wide receivers. There's going to be a traditional screen game to the backs, hence your comments about the offensive line and sort of streamlining that group, because they're going to have to get out in space and do some things, which I'm sure they're excited about. But yeah, those are things we haven't seen as much of from Jalen Milroe at this point that we're going to need to see more of in terms of his development. Hey, let's stick to Saturday night, because you talk about a marquee matchup. Notre Dame travels to College Station, where Texas A&M in game 1 under new head coach Mike Elko is a 3-point favorite. That game opened at 1.5 in favor of the Aggies. It has since gone to 3, 7:30 Eastern on ABC. I guess my one big thing is the Mike Elko, Riley Leonard dynamic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, both these guys were at Duke together a season ago. Now they're on opposite sidelines. I think that Riley Leonard has benefited from the transfer of Bo Collins from Clemson to Notre Dame at the wide receiver position. I just guess between really the head coaches, the quarterbacks, Connor Wegman for A&M coming off the injury, a lot to consider there before we really even get up front to the lines of scrimmage.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's going to be my one big thing for this one, would be the line of scrimmage, would be, can Notre Dame block Shamir Turner and Nick Scorton on that Aggie defensive line? And I understand, Trav, Nick Scorton has just been unblockable. And that's something they really need. The other thing they also need on the line of scrimmage, and Aggie beat writers have told us this, they have not been good on that offensive line for quite a while. Jimbo did me no favors, by the way, in a lot of ways. So that's going to be the thing for me. This is a fascinating game. Game day is going to be there also. But Trev, when you think about it, if Notre Dame wants to be in the playoff picture, isn't this a game that they really need to win? Because I know you've seen it like I have. This is not exactly Notre Dame's toughest schedule.
No, it's not. And this is an opportunity, as we talked about, on as big a stage as Notre Dame might have, or one of them for
Yeah.
sure, all season long to, make an impressive statement with Riley Leonard at quarterback and some of the changes. Elko against Notre Dame last year while at Duke, Duke limited Sam Hartman and Notre Dame's
Yeah.
offense to 21 points. Now,
Yeah.
Notre Dame won the game, but there is some familiarity there, with Mike Elko and Riley Leonard and Notre Dame. So
Mhm.
fascinating to watch play out Saturday night down in Aggie land. Let's push it ahead to Sunday night football. LSU and Southern California from Las Vegas. How about that? LSU is a 4.5-point favorite. That game opened at 6.5, so there's been some money coming in on the Trojans of
Oh,
Lincoln
yeah.
Riley. For me, the one big question in this game is which new defensive coordinator will have his unit
Yeah.
playing the best early on? Will it be Blake
Yeah.
Baker for LSU? Will it be DeAnton Lynn for SC? You've got new defensive line coaches that are of note for both these teams. Bo Davis for LSU, Eric Henderson for Southern California. That's where I sit with this one because those two defenses had a long, long way to go.
Oh, they do. But LSU also, in adding Bo Davis, in adding the defensive coaches they did, I think they are headed more for a quicker turnaround defensively than Southern Cal. Miller Moss, the Southern Cal quarterback, he takes over. That's going to be fascinating to see how that goes. You brought up a good point earlier when we talked about Mississippi State. Travel, a lot of people don't realize Jaquavius Marks from State is going to be their top tailback at this point. I know you're very familiar with this team from the time that your daughter was there. I love this matchup. I love that it's on Sunday night. And I think this is one of those games. Listen, LSU has not won an opener since 2019. They want to change that desperately Sunday night.
They're tired of hearing it. You get the
They
sense.
are, aren't they?
I think the difference in this could be the LSU run game. I think both the quarterbacks are going to put up numbers.
Yes.
I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be good. I think Miller Moss with his wide receiver core is going to put up 300 plus yards. I think the run game for LSU with Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson, a couple of real pounder types at the running back position behind that LSU offensive line. That's where the difference could come in, especially as you get late in this game. I think the personnel for SC up front line wise defensively isn't bad. Bear Alexander, some other transfers that SC has added over the last couple of years. But if I was going to put my eggs in a basket going into this game, it would be the difference being that LSU offensive line with the run game to go along with it. So there you go, Brent. 16 games in less than 60 minutes.
That's right. That's
pretty good, for an opening weekend of Southeastern Conference football. And as always, Brent, appreciate you taking the time. Know you got a lot on your plate, but it is second helping right here on Reier on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to our channel as of yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit us with a thumbs up, a like. That would help us out tremendously as well. Brent, look forward to seeing how it all plays out. We'll do it again soon.
Well, can't wait, bud. Take care. Have a great weekend. And it starts on Thursday and goes through Monday. It should be a holiday week for everybody.
Yeah, it should be, no doubt. For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you once again for joining us here on Second Helping. And until next time, so long, everybody.